Christmas trees. They're a staple of modern Christmas tradition, and you almost see them everywhere, from within people's homes. I bet you right now you've got one, to local stores, which you've probably seen. Places that sell them often have them up everywhere, as well as massive ones in public spaces. So the question is, just how far back does the tradition of a Christmas tree go? Origins of the tradition of Christmas trees, and just putting sort of flowers and, you know, Christmas shrubbery. The word shrubbery, I didn't write it in the script, but I'm going with it now as I'm recording. We need to turn back the clock. A lot further back than you may initially think. In fact, we need to turn the clock so far back, all the way to ancient Egypt. So to the Egyptians, didn't exactly celebrate Christmas, but what they did do was take tree-like things such as palm leaves and reeds and things like that, and they would put them in the homes of people who were sick. Of course, the Egyptian religion was so powerful that bits and pieces bled throughout history and continued to influence history because it influenced the Romans. It was the Romans who first associated plants and trees with Christmas, as they had a festival called Saturnalia. This festival fell during the latter half of December, and it was in fact them celebrating the winter solstice. And like the Egyptians, it meant life to them, but life of their farm yields or whatever. Basically just a good luck thing to say, will we have good vegetables next year? And of course the Vikings and pagans, the Celts, all kind of fed into this idea because they all had a similar concept. In fact, the Vikings created what we would consider today a Yule log. Except back in medieval times, Yule logs were big chunks of wood that sort of just for the fire basically for 12 straight days. So the Vikings have the Yule log. However, at the point of the Vikings doing Yule log stuff, and the Celts and the Romans, after the Vikings in the 10th century, things tend to, well, go a bit dark years, because Christmas traditions in the way of trees and stuff like that obviously were still there, but the physical sense of a Christmas tree didn't appear for a long time. Of Christmas trees doesn't appear until the 16th century, where sources talk of Christmas trees being used, or trees such as pine and all that, to decorate homes around the Christmas period in Germany. And as a side note, for some reason, and I'm assuming it's people who couldn't afford a full tree, just sort of built wooden pyramids and decorated them. For some reason there seemed to be a pyramid building revival. Well, it took them a couple of thousand years, almost 3,000 years if I'm being honest. More than 3,000 years actually, about 4,000 years. Either way, it started in Germany, and it then once again goes a little bit dark as sources just continue to reference trees being used at Christmas. The modern sense of a Christmas tree, which is in the home, is around, didn't start until roughly 1800, when Queen Charlotte, who was the Queen of King George III, yes, the Mad King who had wars with many people, who was a bit nuts. Really. Either way, she wasn't nuts. But what she did do was put up a Christmas tree in 1800, and they were for royalty only. They were a royal thing. Christmas trees were to be a royal thing. That was until 14 years later, when the then Queen Victoria and Prince Albert opted to bring a Christmas tree into their home. And it was Victoria who would create the modern take on the Christmas tree with her own touches. What Queen Victoria did was she placed presents under the Christmas tree. It's a pretty normal thing now, but it was very new. Something else that Queen Victoria did was she made it accessible to the public and the British Empire. And of course that's where the story basically ends, because baubles and lights and tinsel and all that stuff that gets put on Christmas trees today sort of all comes from either a little bit of tradition where people used to put candles on the wooden pyramids and stuff like that to light their homes. But it comes down to one thing: the modern look of the tree that has come out in the sort of the last 100 years or so is mostly a product, at least all the stuff we put on it, from the slow and gradual of holidays throughout the year. From Easter to Halloween to Christmas, all of these traditional holidays have been in fact very commercialized over the last 100 years. But the origins of all these holidays still exist. And as a side note, another tradition that used to be very popular to do with Christmas, when Christmas was more about family rather than the commercialized holiday we have today, was telling scary stories. So I'm going to leave you with a sad and slightly creepy story, talking about the United States. Of course, Victoria commercialized Christmas trees around the world because of the British Empire, and one of those locations was the cities around Lake Superior in the United States. Roughly around 1900, a steamship owned by a man who was, in a sense, a local Santa Claus, as every year out of his own pocket, take an overladen ship full of Christmas trees to different towns, and he would sell them at a less. He would basically make sure that people could get a tree at a fair price, and he would pay to have them transported himself. However, in roughly 1900, during a terrible storm on Lake Superior, its destination harbours on Lake Superior in the wilderness, on the rough seas and stormy weather, the ship vanished. Other ships claimed to see ghost ships, the overladen Christmas tree ship floating on the fog for years upon years afterwards. Eventually, the terrifying truth was discovered. On the bottom of Lake Superior, a ship was discovered. That ship was eventually discovered due to unfortunate circumstances. Some kids were playing on the shores of Lake Superior in December, not too long afterward. A few years afterwards, unfortunately, they stumbled across a welcome for Christmas trees. This sparked a resurgence in the hunt for the lost ship, which sadly was found on the bottom of Lake Superior. On its deck, frozen, perfectly preserved Christmas trees. And those trees and that ship still lie there today. A steamship from the past that still haunts Lake Superior to this day. Of course, there are way more details to this story, and I do at some point potentially will cover the full story once again in a future Christmas video. That was a bare bones reading of that tale from the last century, as Lake Superior has more missing ships. However, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!